Ce projet vise à offrir un espace naturel au cœur d'une ville moderne. La rivière verte comprend de vastes espaces verts et jardins
simply and save the money for reconstruction and do the things that are necessary in the Gulf area for cooperation. I mean, we are very much concerned of what's ongoing in this part of the world and in Africa, affected or fueled, be it the Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates. That is not in your interest at the end, and not in ours, and not in the countries given. That is the one thing. The other thing is, I think, a free trade agreement with the United Arab Emirates is on the agenda, but that cannot, so to say, in my mind, it has all to be seen together. What now in the given situation? So your individual member states of the Gulf Cooperation Council, should there get, we would welcome if you get your acts together amongst yourselves, settle differences and join forces for having a common stance towards the Mullah regime, but also towards us when it is about cooperation. So that enables us to do far more in the area that is necessary to be addressed. So thank you for being here and communicating our messages.
Thank you. For the S&D, Tobias Kremer.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for coming, especially at this moment where I think the crisis in the region is very acute. So I think it's all the more important that you are here today and that we can have this conversation. I'm very glad about your remarks. I can echo what my colleague Michael Gahler said about that. I think it was also a very good sign that we had this meeting between the GCC and the Council very early on in the conflict, and that we now look into how to cooperate there more closely, because what we are seeing is very clear that the threat that you are under and that we are under are linked by also the alliance between Iran and Russia, very clearly, that Russia is supporting Iran when it comes to weapons, when it comes to intelligence, but also when it comes to finances. And I am very glad that President Zelensky of Ukraine was in the Gulf region, has had a lot of bilateral meetings and bilateral agreements. And the first questions I would have is whether there's also some cooperation on the GCC level with Ukraine, whether you've been looking into moving from the bilateral point to a more institutional cooperation with Ukraine, especially when it comes to coordination of support in air defense, so using Ukrainian drones, but also making sure that that we don't compete with one another when it comes to critical air defense from the United States, but that we find a way to cooperate there, given that it is a shared challenge. And my second question would be, we have heard very clearly from our American allies what they would see as a role for European partners in this moment, but I'd be actually much more intrigued to hear from the GCC and from our regional partners what you think a most productive role for Europe and the EU would be in this conflict right now, but especially once there's a peace agreement, and once again how you see the cooperation between the EU and the GCC concretely, with measures of how we can contribute to security and peace in that region. And finally, I just want to echo what Michael Gahler has said, that you talk about increased cooperation, trade, etc. I'm fully on board with that, but once again, we'd be grateful if you could carry that back to some of your member states as well. That, of course, it makes it much harder for us if we then see the images of Sudan and the role that some of the member states are alleged to play there. That makes it much harder to go further in that cooperation. But yes, my other two questions, I'd be very intrigued to hear your view on that. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Patriots, Antonio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary General, thank you very much for coming and speaking to us. We always appreciate that, and I must say that I see in this Parliament a very strong will to cooperate with the Gulf countries, both individually and in group. And I'd like to commend the work of the President of the delegation for the Gulf region, my colleague, Mr. Lobatka, who has been very active in this role. Well, this said, the Gulf countries are an essential partner for the Europeans, and this is not just words, this is a fact. Because we have our problems, we have our misunderstandings as well, so we cannot give moral lessons to others how they should behave or how they should be united if we are not ourselves. Well, but nevertheless, I'd like to tell you that we make an effort here to be, as a whole, at least a very strong group vis-à-vis the Gulf. This said, I'd like to ask your attention for a couple of things. I know that conflicts, mainly in that region, in the Middle East, are not to be solved, they are to be managed. We did the same in other parts of the world, like Bosnia, for instance, and now the situation does not like to be easily solved. But a small detail, which is not small at all, that I'd like to ask for your attention, and that is the support of certain countries in the Gulf region to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is doing a very bad job in Europe already. The report of the French secret services about that. In my country, in other countries, I mean, they go very smoothly and quietly, but in fact, they could spoil the relations between you and us, and spoil the relations among ourselves as well. So that I think nobody else would like to speak about. I'd like to have your attention on this and act. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. For the ECR, who would like to take the floor? Ms. Maréchal.
Oui, merci présence et votre propos introductif. J'ai quelques questions rapidement en ce qui concerne le conflit aujourd'hui au Moyen-Orient. Est-ce que le Conseil de coopération du Golfe soutient aujourd'hui explicitement le désarmement du Hezbollah, qui est aujourd'hui évidemment au cœur des discussions entre Israël et le Liban? Et deuxième question, plus généralement dans le cadre d'un accord de paix dans la région, quelle est la position du CCG à propos de l'inclusion ou non du Liban dans la paix? Pour le dire autrement, le CCG plaide pour un accord global ou pour un accord séparé?
Thank you, Madam. For Renew, Petras Austrevicius.
Thank you, Chair. General, welcome to the European Parliament. It's always good, to be dialogue and to establish bridges. As you said, to quote you, your exchange with the Representative Kaja Kallas was things about you discussed both sides sharing understanding. Mr. Secretary General, do you share the European imminent concern about Russian threat to the European security? In this regard, does the JCC is considering to ask member states, your member states, to obey sanctions regimes we have imposed against Russia, because we want to stop this war, assist Ukraine in reconstruction and modernization? But there are some examples of circumvention of sanctions through the certain ties between Gulf countries and Russian Federation. And as you know, we call Russia, among other countries, including Iran, as evil ring, which does destroy international order, to which you alluded as well. Secondly, you mentioned about the need to expand and to develop cooperation, with what I agree. As you know, we have developed, the European Union, a kind of the security and defense partnership instrument, which is a series. It's a new instrument with a new substance and new goals. Up to now, 12 countries, member states, have already signed or in a process of agreeing. What is your opinion about the Gulf countries' interest, any of them, signing security and defense partnership agreement with the European Union? Thank you for your replies.
Thank you. Petras, for the Greens, Hannah Neumann, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Yassem, for being with us again, and also thank you for your important work in difficult times. Colleagues of mine have very good questions on Russia and Sudan, so I can focus more on the situation in the Middle East. And here we are somehow again on the same side these days, I would say, because neither the EU nor the GCC wanted this war, but we clearly have to deal with its consequences. The consequences are problematic for us in the European Union, but they are even more drastic for the Gulf countries. And I'm afraid there might even be more problems ahead. So first of all, I would like to express our solidarity with the Gulf countries in the face of Iranian attacks. In the shadow of this big escalation, we also see so many things happening in the region. Up front on the headlines, but they are just happening in the shades, such as Israel expanding settlements in the West Bank and passing apartheid laws, militias in Iraq killing women's rights activists, the Iranian regime forcibly disappearing and executing protesters. And after, I think we all have stared a bit into the abyss last week with this threat of annihilation on the table. We at least have a ceasefire now, but we have negotiation dynamics driven by Donald Trump, by Netanyahu, and by the Iranian regime. And frankly said, that doesn't make me feel very comfortable. So I'm convinced if the European Union and the GCC would join forces, we could become an actor in this. And to complement basically the people that created the madness trying to solve the madness without even be willing to uphold ideas such as international law, respect in international relations, or the rights of the Iranian people to decide by themselves by whom and how they want to be governed, because this has been totally kicked off the agenda. I mean, and that's the question I have to ask ourselves, and we have to ask this to our leaders, but as you are here now, we can also ask this to the GCC, is why don't we start our own initiative to try to solve this mess, rather than staring at these people solving it where we know they won't? Where's the push, for example, to initiate a Middle East conference thinking about ways ahead based on international law, proper international relations, the rights of the Iranian people? So we should ask this to our leadership, but now as you're here, that is basically my key question to you. Where's the GCC push in this regard?
Right, thank you. For the left, Danilo Della Valle.
Thank you. I will switch to Italian. Grazie Presidente, grazie per il confronto e ringrazio il segretario Al-Boudawi per la relazione. Io voglio cominciare con esprimere la mia solidarietà a tutti coloro che subiscono i bombardamenti e anche al popolo iraniano per l'attacco criminale che ha subito recentemente, che ha subito la violazione di ogni norma del diritto internazionale